thank you for coming in. It's been nice to see people walk around and recognize things from West Concord. And I'll be talking a little bit more about what you see around you as well. My name is Janae Kizzy. I've worked in archives since 2005 when I, desperate to get out of a job in the lingerie department at Macy's, applied for an archivist assistant position at Princeton University. 2 years and a few months ago, I had one of the luckiest turns in my career, in a very lucky archives career. I was hired by the Concord Free Public Library, an institution with deep and important collections and connections to the history of the town and to the nation. Since then, I've had the privilege of working as part of an amazing team of special collections professionals. I've also been responsible for organizing and arranging 5 fascinating collections. I'm here this evening to tell you about one of those projects, the processing and digitization of the Concord Postcard collection, which led to this exhibit and the creation of an exciting new resource for the library website, which is those lovely little cards that you got when you came in. As I talk about the development of the project, we'll also follow the journey that led to the first postcard in this exhibit, over there, Islands in Warner's Pond. And we'll learn a bit more about how something so ubiquitous and yet strangely personal, the postcard, came to provide such interesting perspectives on West Concord. And finally, at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about each postcard that's highlighted in the exhibit with a little bit more about the origins and context of each. An intrepid photographer stood at the edge of Warner's Pond by Commonwealth Avenue and Concord Junction, or as we know it now, West Concord. The photographer had chosen this time of day because Warner's Pond filled up quickly with swimmers, fishermen, and canoers in the warm months. The spot was ideal because the ice houses on the opposite bank were obscured by trees, making for a slightly artificial but undeniably idyllic natural scene. Determined to reproduce the beauty of the landscape, the photographer handled the camera's heavy wooden case with care, mounting it on a tripod, aligning the viewfinding grooves with the horizon, and taking one last moment to make sure the scene was just right before pushing the brass button to open the shutter. Slowly, invisibly, the landscape etched itself upon film. The big sky with its hazy clouds, the water disturbed slightly by a gentle wind, and the islands bristling with trees were all captured and would endure long after the photographer was gone and the pond itself had changed forever. In the summer of 2015, I had just finished my first year as a project archivist for the William Monroe Special Collections at Concord Free Public Library. The project my title referred to had been a massive one. I had processed, to the very last folder, the records of the first parish in Concord. The collection consisted of about 280 boxes and volumes and covered 400 years of Concord history. And while the history of the first parish is riveting, 365 days of boxes, Bibles, and folders later, I was definitely ready for something different. At the same time, the curator of special collections, Leslie Perrin-Wilson, who is in this room right now, Leslie, had a discerning eye on the future. Among the pending projects, she had noticed that the Concord Postcard collection, which had been mostly categorized, was an opportunity for the special collections at the library to shine. Considering the visual appeal of postcards, the digital capabilities of the department, and the number of requests for images of Concord that Special Collections receives on a daily basis, she devised a plan. In the coming months, I would digitize the entire Concord postcard collection, about 1,000 postcards, for a display and research guide on the library website. The postcard collection webpage would allow the public to view and even download some of the images from the collection. While the end product of the project, a gallery of postcard images and descriptions, would have to be simple and usable for the public, the process of making the collection accessible was deeply complex. I had to develop a plan, scan hundreds of images, match the images to the data that would make them useful, and mount them on the library website. And the irony here, of course, is this is a postcard of the First Parish Church, And there's about 30 of them in the collection, so there was no getting away from the first parish, as any Concord resident knows. The photograph of Warner's Pond arrived in the mail at the Albertype Company in Brooklyn. The company was in the middle of its heyday at the turn of the 20th century. The building took up a large hunk of the Brooklyn streetscape, with the company's name spanning the height of the building's top floor in big white letters. In the company's hand, the photograph of Warner's Pond had been faithfully etched onto the surface of a metal plate in a process that smelled as toxic as it was: gelatin and chemicals, and a series of water baths that never fully cleared the air. The printing room, a 50 by 60 foot rectangle of wood, brick, and metal, was crammed with printing machines the size of a Model T car, not to mention pallets of ink and bales of paper. The printer had never seen West Concord, and probably never would, but he was nevertheless responsible for thousands of its likenesses. When printing began, sheet after sheet of paper was rung through the press, and the plate inked at even intervals to keep the image even. When the ink was dry, an artist who had never seen the way the light reflects off the water on a summer's day in West Concord would imagine it, wet a well-used paintbrush, and dip it into a rosy hue. Gradually, Warner's Pond at sunrise emerged by the hundredfold. Digitization is an undeniable buzzword, and in the 20 years since the internet forever disturbed the cobwebs of cloistered thinking about archives, many have had their say. Getting ready for the digitization project, I read a lot, and I worried a lot. From the naming schema for the digital files to the number of pixels per square inch of every single image, I worried. As I framed the postcard project, I read endlessly about the state and shape of digital archives and digitized collections, from bootstrap projects done by a cell phone camera to massive crowdsourced compendiums of archival material. I learned that no one can tell an organization exactly how to digitize its own collections. What works for a massive academic archives with an endless stream of work-study students, for example, does not and should not work for a small public-private archives. As a result, the decisions made by the Special Collections team about the project involved careful consideration of our collections, our time, and our audience. How could we best share our wonderful resource in the way that modern internet users are used to, in a way that made sense for the library? Over time, things fell into place. All of the images would be available in a size just big enough to get an idea of the image's content. For images assuredly out of copyright, larger images like these would be available. For time and sanity, only the picture part of the postcard would be scanned, but I would record some of the information about what was on the back. Then, to make the massive amount of images and data manageable for those browsing, I would assign subject headings and keywords. I would encounter other worries during the process: duplicate postcards, duplicate images from different publishers, souvenir postcards, handwritten messages, stamps, and even one postcard printed on leather, which I think is on this reel. But for the time, the path seemed clear, and I began. I was wondering if people would find it familiar. Yeah, you see it? Yeah. Yep. John H. Snow and Charles Knoll, the esteemed proprietors of the Whitney Pharmacy in 1904, had heard all about the hot new trend of postcards and immediately knew it would be just right for the people of West Concord and their Commonwealth Avenue storefront. The two men knew West Concord and its citizens well. They were, even as businessmen, West Concordians who participated in town life. Knoll was the town consul for the League of American Bicyclists, and Snow's descendants would be part of the area pharmacies for the next 100 years. Their wives, too, were invested. Both women were regulars at the tonic table of the Concord Junction Women's Club's lawn parties. The souvenir postcard has passed its time as novelty and has now become a necessity, announced the practical druggist and spatula, enamored by the trend. The postcard craze, as they were calling it, really was something, and Snow and Knoll weren't about to miss out. The junction was just a stone's throw away, and any good businessman knew there was money to be had from tourist, commuter, and local alike. Best of all, postcards were a perfect match for the showcases they had installed when John Whitney, the original proprietor, had retired. People would be drawn in from the sidewalk by the exciting images, and if they happened to order a glass or two of fine soda water from the pharmacy's well-polished soda fountain while they admired the display, so much the better. 3 months into the project, and with the expertise of Robert Hall, our Special Collections Technical Services Associate, I had scanned 890 postcards and created a 3-module searchable database that associated all 890 images with metadata describing their measurements, images, and publishing information. I had also matched that data to 350 keywords and subject terms and built a 3rd module that took all that data and image information and coded it for the website. Then, working with Robert and Leslie, the digital landscape for the collection came together. We determined that the data about the individual postcards would get the same real estate as the images. And I know it's going to be out of time with what I'm describing, but I'll show you. As you can see, the images are right next to the data. Each postcard's data would be directly next to the small version of the image for easy viewing, and a frame of link-colored blue would indicate visually when a larger image was available. We also spent some time thinking about how the overall context of the collection should be displayed. The About section, as we call it, contains much of the important and even essential data about the collection. It describes the collection's extent, a brief history of the postcard, and a detailed technical explanation of the digitization process. While that is fascinating to archivists and useful for the first-time visitor, we determined that the postcard images themselves should be the central focus. As a result, we gave the About information, its own page. The structure came together from all of these disparate factors. The collection would be displayed across 4 pages, 1 for the About section, 2 for the full run of postcard images and data, and 1 for the high-res images. What you're seeing right now is page 3 of 4, so this is H through Z. Other features would be included, the number of postcards under each subject heading, a page to view all high-resolution images at once, an index of cross-references and related terms, and alphabetical guides to the subject headings and index terms. Finally, I used a database to create links between all of the pages, each and every index and image link, and all the subject links. For those of you who like numbers, that's over 14,500 links, about 3,600 links per page. So that all the information was connected and easy to browse. With all the behind-the-scenes minutiae put in place, a simple, fun-to-browse web experience came into focus. The web pages debuted in July of this year and have already been an aid to researchers. Anyone can view the web pages, and anyone can use the larger images so long as they credit the library. In 1910, a man named Bill waded through the shallow water of Warner's Pond, dragging his canoe behind him to the shore by its nose. He was in a reflective mood, having spent time alone on the water, and he remembered the card his friend Nellie and Natick had sent to him. The next day, Bill found himself at the Whitney Pharmacy, looking over the rows and rows of images of Concord, Concord Junction, and the neighboring towns. They had the typical tourist sites like the Minuteman, the First Parish Church, and even photographs of the Damon Mill and the State Reformatory. The one he chose, the little lake he had canoed on earlier, was affordable, between 2 and 3 cents, not including the cost of a 1-cent stamp. Finally, with the sights and sounds of the pond on his mind, he wrote to Nellie about his day and the wonderful things he had seen. There wasn't a lot of room on the postcard, so he put it simply, a very pretty place. So that concludes the screen part of the presentation, and now I'll talk a little bit about the postcards around the room. The exhibit is 12 images from West Concord, West Concord has a fair representation in the collection with about 30 or so postcards. The majority of the West Concord images originated from the Whitney Pharmacy, which is where Saltbox Kitchen is now. And there's more information about the Whitney Pharmacy if you're interested in the display case at the top of the stairs. I chose each of these images because they showed some interesting aspect of West Concord life, while also showing the many different kinds of postcards in the collection. Starting from my right, your left, in the corner over there, is Warner's Pond, which also featured highly in my talk. It also includes the back of the postcard. Many of the notes that were on the 890, the collection is about 1,000 postcards, but only 890 original images, individual images. So in the 1,000 or so postcards, the notes were pretty much along these lines. Very sweet, very short. Some of them were mean, some of them were strange, some of them were in French. But they were basically along these lines. People visiting Concord or in Concord or passing through Concord, talking about their experience and just connecting with the people in their lives. This postcard is also an example of hand coloring in postcards, which was simpler and kind of all we had in the beginning of postcards in terms of getting some color. And then when we get all the way to the other side of the room, we'll talk a little bit about color printing and the labor involved in that. So next to those two are the two pictures of the train station. One hand-colored photograph was possibly taken from the since-lost third floor of the Concord Junction Hall Association building, which burned in 1906. The second is a real photograph postcard. That's the black and white one. A real photograph differs from what we traditionally think of as a postcard because it's a chemically developed photograph that was printed on a piece of paper the size of a postcard and kept or mailed out, depending. Unfortunately, that photographic medium also predisposes it to damage, as you can see in this image. But it also makes real photographs often one of a kind. And we do have quite a few real photographs in the collection. And next to those, we have two postcards in different styles of falls and dams of the Assabet. Each demonstrates the town's pride in its manufacturing capabilities and its landscape. The oval style we see over here is a frequent motif in postcards from the early to mid 20th century and was evocative of the connection between postcards and greeting cards. And this postcard over here with the note on the front is from the beginning of postcards where you weren't allowed to write on the back of the postcard. That's from about 1890 to 1907. So some postcard companies gave you space in the front, some people just rebelled and just wrote on the front because they wanted to, but yeah, it was a pretty common practice. All right, so over on this side of the room, we see the West Concord Grammar School, which was located right over there on Main Street toward Commonwealth. It was built in 1887 and eventually combined with the Harvey Wheeler School, but the building has since been demolished. The next image should look rather familiar because it's directly across the street. And it's the West Concord Union Church. This image was taken just after the church's first building was moved and a new building was erected. This building was then expanded in 1961. Beside that, we see two factory buildings. One is the Strathmore Worsted Mill, once the Damon Mill, now the Damon Mill Square, which is used as office and retail space. Worsted, by the way, this is a fun fact if you don't already know, is wool yarn and woven wool fabrics. Beside that, the yellow building over there, we see the Boston Harness Company, another beautifully hand-colored postcard. The company was open from 1890 to the 1940s near Baker Avenue, and you can see the railings beside the Assovet on either side of the road. In the next postcard, that's another real photograph postcard. It's unlabeled, but we believe it was from an event at Rideout Playground in the early 20th century. The clothing of the people, as well as the presence of horse-drawn carriages, indicates that the event took place in the late 19-teens-ish. And then finally, in the corner, we have one non-West Concord postcard. I'm sorry, but it's it says on the postcard Concord Junction, but it's actually Deaconess Hospital, which was a predecessor of Emerson Hospital, and we removed it from the exhibit, and then we put it back in because it's a great example of halftone printing, which was sort of a midway between the hand painting of postcards we saw back in the day and the printing, the beautiful printing we're used to these days. As the poster explains, the printing process changed in the mid-20th century from lithography to printing using layers of dots called halftone. And we still see this process in newspapers, for example, today. And you can read more about that in Where Do the Dots Come From? All right. One of my favorite things about the collection is the casual visual glimpse of the past they provide. Because this craze so readily captured anything that might slightly catch the eye, there are many places represented in the collection that have changed over time, and places that we might not actively photograph now that are represented. For example, we see Commonwealth Avenue, a place we look at every day to the point of not seeing it, frozen in a moment that has become rare and special. We see lofts that were once factories as they were originally intended, and we vividly see the consequences of our choices as a town, a nation, and a planet on our landscapes. But I think the best then and now of postcards is simply the endurance of sentiment and human connection. As soon as the photograph was invented, we were anxious to share what our eyes saw with those we wished were closer, and that need remains to this day. Thank you. I can take questions as long as they're not too hard.
I'm curious that the photograph with the trains was taken from a very high altitude.
Yeah.
Any idea how that would have been done back then?
My guess, we have a couple that were taken from water towers. My guess is that this was the Concord Hall Association, which stood also near the post office, basically. And it's gone now. We don't have anything that high, but it's that's my guess.
Okay.
Yeah. They weren't on giant ladders or not to my knowledge. Yeah. Penny farthings. Any other questions?
So did you have a favorite postcard?
Oh, I have many favorite postcards, but I think I've kind of shown my hand here. I really love real photograph postcards. I think they're really beautiful. So that's like the train station over here and the Rideout Playground image over here, where it was just somebody who took a picture and then maybe they made copies of it, but maybe they didn't, and then they sent it out, and it's just something so intimate and immediate. There was another one hidden in the slideshow. You may have seen it. It was Main Street, Concord, in a snowstorm, in a blizzard, and so one of the trees was completely split, and that's just a moment. Like that tree wasn't there for very long after that, but somebody came out and took a picture, and then they sent it to somebody. So the real photographs are among my favorites. There are some very kitschy photographs, postcards of the Minuteman, which I also love. And then the one on leather, which, I mean, how do you even mail that? It's just, I don't know. I don't know.
Jenny, I know that there was
trolley line that went through West Concord, went down Church Street, went along Commonwealth Avenue and downtown. Do you have any postcards of the trolleys that ran through town back in the
Maybe.
early, well,
Early 20th century.
early 20th century?
Maybe. Let's talk. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I saw like a train where I wasn't expecting a train somewhere in the collection, but there's 890 images back there, so I can't say for sure, but yeah. Yeah.
You could search the site.
Yes, yeah. I should do my plug.
Yeah.
So if you look on the website, there's a large index that if there is like a railroad car looking thing or a trolley, there might be a subject heading for that as well. Yeah. But also we can talk.
What's the viewpoint of this photograph? I mean, it seems to be somewhere near the depot because there's a church on Church Street and the Mansard Roof House across the street from it. So this would have to be somewhere near Commonwealth Avenue.
Yes.
It's,
Hold on. I don't know if I still have the. Yes, good. All right. So this is the whole of that
it's a
image.
detail, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so.
And it says Concord Junction, Mass. From Water Tower. And this one, as you can see, is an extra long postcard. And it's not actually part of the postcard collection. I just love the image. It's part of the photograph collection, which is also amazing. And I highly recommend talking to Leslie about.
If this is a comment, and you may have mentioned it, but I thought it was fascinating for anybody who may have had the chance to see the Wyeth exhibition at both the library but also at the museum, because there were postcards that N.C. Wyeth had purchased of different places in Concord, and I think those postcards live at the Brandywine Museum, but were borrowed for the exhibition, so they were really his postcards that were kept. So that's kind of a neat thing. I wonder if those postcards are in the collection.
That's exactly it. Yeah, where people, if they were images of Concord, right?
There were images of
Yeah.
Concord which he actually used
Yeah.
in the panels that he did. That he used them for almost like for reference. And
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you recall if there was anything of the old Elmwood Hotel on Commonwealth Avenue?
Maybe. This is when I'm supposed to plug the site again. Take a look at the site. Please take a look at the site. Did you get a card? One of our beautiful. I can't say for sure. It sounds familiar, but I can't say for sure. Yeah.
I think there might be something in our photo file that shows it, although it's not filed under Elmwood Hotel, it's filed under something else and you can just see it. But I don't think there is a postcard.
Okay.
But something in the photo collection?
In the photo file, I'm not 100% sure I could ever put my hands on it again because it's filed in some other subject completely. But
Okay.
Come visit us. Any other questions?
so I have a couple. Is this collection totally dependent on donations? Some that come to you from other people.
So we collected some, and then we ourselves acquired some, and then we were gifted many as well. And so whenever it was gifted, you can actually see in the massive amount of postcard metadata, you'll see that it was gifted from somebody.
You
So yeah.
actively sought to acquire some as well.
yeah, I bought
Yeah.
some off of eBay. There's a really great one that I've only seen our copy of that shows the 99 restaurant, and it's a really good image of it, really image. So,
And then my second question was, what was the most surprising thing you encountered when you were putting this together?
This might get a little boring because I'm deep down I'm an archivist, so the standards for digital images and taking care of digital images and organizing them is just fascinating, and there's been a lot of great organizations out there doing great work and how to categorize them and how to group them so that people can find them. So there was some great guidance there, and luckily Leslie was also there to like talk me down from from going too crazy with it. Also just the notes, the personal stories that are sort of told in the postcards, in addition to the choices of locations in town. It's not always the pretty lake. Sometimes it's just like the house, the splintered tree, the kids playing outside, and that was surprising because I expected 890 pictures of the Minuteman. And yeah.
It seems from what you're saying as though in the early 20th century, I mean, when we think of postcards now, we think of something that people buy when they're tourists in a place, as kind of souvenirs of a place that they came as tourists. It sounds, because many of these things weren't tourist attractions, it sounds as though people were just using them for everyday correspondence, even when they weren't traveling.
Yep, it was Twitter. It was Instagram. It really was. It was, how do I get my hands on a picture without having to own an expensive camera and be a chemist? I go to the pharmacy and I buy a postcard and I say, this is where I was. Here you go. Also, I'll see you on Tuesday. Like, it was that same kind of thing, yeah.
Or how can I write to somebody and not write them 2 pages but not look rude?
Yes, yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, like a text message. Yeah. Exactly.
Were the actual photographs, they were mounted on another piece of paper in order to be mailed?
The real photograph postcards, it was a special paper, so it was like there's still, some of them are so thin that I don't even know how they got through the mail in the first place, which is another source of damage. But some of them were like on a nice good cardstock, so they had a better lifespan than some of the other ones. Yeah, it varied. There's a great book on that, which I quote on the website, which you should visit. Everyone should visit the website. By Rosamund Vowell, Vaule. She wrote a whole book on real photograph postcards, and it's stunning. It's really great. Yeah.
I came late, so if you've already mentioned this.
I'll tell you again. Don't worry.
Did you get a sense from the ones that had addresses on them, so they were being sent pretty much from Concord to faraway places, or that Natick?
Right? Yeah. You could have just shouted.
Did you have a sense of where they've used for pretty local, or did people send them far away, like to a family member in California or something?
Both. It was a good mix. Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking about how, you might just share something
Right.
with someone. When I first moved here 21, 22 years ago, I was told you could put a letter in the mailbox or at the post office. If you got it in before 7, it would be 7 a.m. It would be delivered that day to someone else in Concord.
Right.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so I don't know, that just
Exactly.
made me think of that.
It's a text message. It's it's just.
Well, we're sort of having a thought here about, West Concord is a fairly proud place where people are pretty determined to maintain this sense of separateness even though they're part of Concord. And I wonder if somehow these postcards of West Concord in particular aren't about that evolving sense of a neighborhood within a bigger place that wants to make sure it doesn't get swallowed up.
Very much so. I think that's the Charles Whitney, Charles Knoll and John H. Snow. They, as people working at the Whitney pharmacy, I think they were a big part of that. They knew very well that they should not take only pictures of the Minuteman and bring them over here. They did local stuff, just things that no one else would think to see or love, but a West Concordian would know and want. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Please.
Keep looking at this one over here,
Mm-hmm.
the river,
The river.
stream, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it?
Where?
Is it long gone? Does it still exist?
Westvale. So that's
This one.
Yeah, that's the mill.
Isn't that by the?
That would be near Damon Mill. right?
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yep,
It's got another name.
You got it.
I think of right now, but it's called
This is
something.
Yeah, okay.
Well, there's the Westdale development that's there, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Question
Thank you,
about
everybody, for answering the question. Yeah. We're all like, I didn't even need to be here.
Kind of related to the question about the kind of distinct identities of Concord and West Concord. Route 2 is sort of what we think of as the geographical barrier, but that didn't come through until what, the 1930s?
Yeah.
So was the river the geographical? Was the railroad?
The railroad.
Yeah.
It was the railroad, for sure. I mean, hence the name of the town. The thing that wound up unifying the town was the fact that there was a junction here, and then there were different separate neighborhoods based upon the mills. I think that's where we get the mill area, and then the junction, and then it all kind of came together. So yeah, I think it was the railroad. Leslie can tell me different.
Until, I'm not sure how long ago it was, but West Concord had its own zip code until probably 20 years ago. Then it got
Yes.
merged, yeah.
Wow.
Then it got merged because it was, the industrial community was down here, was the
That's
balloon
it.
factory,
Yeah.
and all of these things. And the communications between town people down in Concord and West Concord, basically, the people who communicated were the Damons, because they own a mill, and Mr. Damon, I think, was made or inducted into the social circle, but he was just one person. And it's basically, there was that back and forth conversations between the people of means, and everyone else was basically manned the mills, made the harnesses. In fact, the harnesses that were made in the harness factory, they were, during the First World War, there were harnesses there that were made for the Russian army. So I mean, there's a lot of history in terms of what went on, but it was basically separate
Right.
for that reason, different economics.
There we go. Yeah, which is where you put your train station. Yeah.
And which was called the Union Station, like every station at the time.
Right. Thank you, everybody. I'll linger if anybody wants to ask me questions one-on-one. But thank you all for your time, and thank you for joining us.